The square stank of oil, dust, and yesterday's rain. Traders packed up their stalls early, not because the day was over, but because no one wanted to be too close to the stage in the center. The punishment platform, a slab of weather-worn metal raised above the cracked pavement, waited under the dim glow of street lamps. People gathered despite their distaste. Crowds always came to see a public shaming, even when they pretended otherwise. The alien girl stood barefoot on the platform, her thin frame rigid with defiance, though her shoulders shook. Her skin had the soft silver hue of the Inerii. Her pupil, and the faint bioluminescent markings along her arms flickered erratically, the way they did when an Inerei's heartbeat was racing. She had nothing to cover herself but the tattered remains of a shift. Strips of cloth clung to her, like someone had torn them away just to make a point. The crowd's murmurs blended into a cruel chorus. A guard barked something in the guttural colony dialect and hurled a metalkin toward her. It struck her leg and clattered to the ground. Laughter broke out from one corner. The girl didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. Another can followed, then a chunk of rotten fruit. The smell of it clung to the damp air. From the back of the crowd, Jalen saw enough to sour his stomach. He'd come to Vera's outer colony for a trade contract, nothing more. Deliver his cargo, sign the paperwork, and be gone before the next jump cycle. He wasn't here to make friends, and certainly not to make enemies. But the sight on the platform dragged him forward before his brain caught up. The guards were stationed at each corner of the platform, armed with shock pikes more suited for crowd control than execution. The audience wasn't afraid of the girl, they were enjoying the spectacle. Jalen pushed past two onlookers, ignoring the curses they threw his way. He wasn't even sure what he meant to do until he saw her flinch again, this time from a jagged stone that grazed her temple. The bioluminescent markings down her cheek dimmed, like a dying ember. Without thinking, he shrugged off his coat, a long, heavy synth leather piece he'd saved for cold weather runs, and stepped up onto the platform. The nearest guard reached for him, but Jalen moved faster, slinging the coat around her shoulders and pulling it closed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted for the guards to stop him. The girl stiffened under his touch, clearly uncertain whether he was rescuing her or just another form of humiliation. Jalen kept his voice low. "Don't move. You're covered now." The guard at his right swung the butt of his pike toward him. Jalen caught it one-handed, shoving it aside. The move wasn't aggressive enough to be seen as an attack, but enough to make the guard step back. "You want to charge me? Do it after she's off this platform," Jalen said, his voice carrying farther than he'd intended. The murmuring crowd was suddenly very quiet. The girl looked up at him, eyes pale and faintly luminous in the low light. "You shouldn't," she started, but he cut her off with a small shake of his head. Two guards moved to block his exit, but Jalen didn't stop walking, forcing them to either part or escalate the scene into a brawl in front of the colony's gawkers. After a tense pause, they stepped aside. They reached the edge of the square, and Jalen kept moving until the noise behind them faded. Only then did he slow, glancing at her. She was still clutching the coat tightly, trembling in the cold night air. "You can give it back when you've got somewhere safe," he said. She laughed once, a sharp, bitter sound. "Safe? Do you even know where you are?" He knew enough. The outer colony wasn't friendly to strangers, especially humans. And it sure as hell wasn't friendly to an Inerii girl accused of whatever crime she'd been charged with. Doesn't matter. That didn't need to happen back there. She stopped walking, forcing him to stop too. "You just made yourself a target. Do you understand that?" Jalen met her gaze. "Guess I'll find out." Her eyes flicked past him, scanning the street. "You will. They won't let this go." She hesitated, then added, "You should leave me." "Not planning on it," he said. They moved again, slipping into a narrow service corridor between warehouses. The air smelled of rust and stagnant water. Somewhere distant, a cargo hauler's engines hummed. When they reached a recessed loading bay, Jalen leaned against the wall. "You got a name?" She hesitated before answering. "Sarah." "All right, Sarah. You want to tell me why they were doing that to you?" Her eyes dropped to the ground. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." She opened her mouth, then froze, her head tilting toward the far end of the corridor. Jalen followed her gaze. Two silhouettes moved into view, the same guards from before, now joined by a third figure in a dark, official-looking coat. Sarah's markings flared brighter along her jaw. "We have to go," she said, voice low and urgent. Jalen didn't waste time asking questions. Sierra's voice had that sharp edge people got when their instincts were screaming. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the shadowed end of the loading bay, just as the guard's footsteps quickened. The bay's rusted service hatch loomed ahead. He shouldered it open with a screech of metal on metal and shoved her inside. The narrow maintenance tunnel beyond reeked of stale air and chemical runoff. Pipes lined the walls, dripping condensation that pattered onto the metal grating under their boots. Sierra's grip on his coat tightened as they moved, her bare feet barely making a sound. Behind them, the echo of boots on metal rang through the corridor. "They're faster than you think," she whispered, breathing hard. "I've outrun worse," Jalen muttered. But even he wasn't sure this was true. The tunnel bent sharply, leading to a junction lit by a single flickering bulb. He pulled her into a side shaft, ducking behind a stack of supply crates. The footsteps passed, fading into the distance. She crouched beside him, still trembling. "You shouldn't be here," she said again. But this time her voice cracked, less warning and more plea. "Yeah, you've said that twice now," he replied. Still not listening. Her luminous eyes studied him, like she was trying to measure what kind of man would do something this stupid. "They think I stole something," she said finally. Jalen frowned. "Did you?" "Not the way they mean." "That's not an answer." She hesitated, her gaze shifting to the floor. "It's something from their archives. A record. Information they've been hiding for years. I copied it." Jalen let out a slow breath. "And I'm guessing this isn't the kind of thing you can just return and apologize for." "They'd kill me before I could explain." And now, her voice trailed off, and her eyes flicked toward him. "Now they'll kill you too." He rubbed his jaw. "Then we'd better not give them the chance." They moved deeper into the maintenance network, winding through dim, low-ceilinged corridors until they emerged into the outskirts of the colony's industrial zone. The air outside was colder, sharper, carrying the metallic tang of refinery smoke. Sierra's steps slowed as she wrapped the coat tighter. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My ship," Jalen said. She stopped. "No, you can't. They'll have the docks locked down by now. Every exit scanned." "Then we'll figure out another way," he said, already scanning the streets ahead. His mind worked through maps he'd memorized on arrival. There was one place they might be able to hide, at least for a few hours, an old freight exchange that had been condemned years ago, now used by smugglers when the patrols got too close. By the time they reached it, the night had deepened. The freight exchange's walls were covered in rust and peeling paint, its gates chained but not locked. Inside, the shadows seemed to swallow them whole. Sierra sat on a crate, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. Jalen leaned against the wall, studying her. "Because nobody else did." Her gaze held his for a long moment, and he caught the faint shimmer of moisture in her eyes before she turned away. They didn't speak again until the sound of distant engines cut through the stillness. Jalen moved to the cracked window, peering out. A patrol skimmer swept the streets, its searchlights slicing through the dark. It paused, scanning the area, before moving on. Sierra exhaled slowly. "You have no idea what you're in the middle of." "Then tell me," he said. She shook her head. "If I tell you, you'll be in deeper than you already are." He gave her a dry look. "I think we passed that point when I put my coat on you." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. When she spoke again, her voice was low. "The record I stole, it's proof. Proof that the colony leaders have been selling Inerii labor to the war front in the rim sectors. Disappearing people. My brother was one of them." Jalen felt the weight of her words settle in the pit of his stomach. Forced conscription. Disappearances. The kind of thing no one wanted to believe until the evidence slapped them in the face. "And you were going to do what with this proof?" "Get it off-world. To someone who could use it." And now, her eyes met his, steady despite the tremor in her voice. "Now I can't even get out of the city alive." He stepped closer. "Maybe you can." Her lips curved in a humorless smile. "You really think you can outrun an entire colony's security?" "I don't need to outrun all of them," he said. "Just enough to get you to the jump lanes." Before she could answer, the sound of heavy boots and clanging metal echoed from the loading bay outside. The patrol had found them. Jalen swore under his breath and grabbed her hand. They slipped through a side door, into an alley choked with steam from a leaking vent. Figures moved in the mist ahead, more guards, their shock pikes glowing faintly. "This way," he murmured, pulling her toward a narrow service ladder. They climbed fast, emerging onto the roof. The city sprawled below, lights scattered like cold stars. The refinery stacks belched smoke into the dark. They crossed the rooftops, leaping narrow gaps, until they reached the edge of the district. From here, the spaceport lights glimmered faintly on the horizon. Sierra caught his arm, breathless. "You can't get me through there. They'll be watching every dock." "Then we don't go through the dock," he said. "We go under it." Her eyes widened. "The underlines? That's suicide. Only if you don't know the way." They descended into the city's skeletal underbelly, where old cargo rails and abandoned maglev tunnels crisscrossed in the dark. The air was damp, the walls slick with condensation. Somewhere in the shadows, something chittered. As they moved, Jalen could feel her staying closer to him, her earlier stiffness easing. Whether it was trust or just necessity, he didn't know. They were halfway through the tunnel when voices echoed ahead, sharp, commanding, and getting closer. Jalen pulled her into a recessed alcove, pressing a finger to his lips. 2 guards passed within meters, their lights sweeping the corridor. When they were gone, Ciro whispered, "You're risking everything for someone you just met." "Maybe," he said, "but maybe you're worth it." She looked away, but he saw the way her grip on his coat tightened. They pushed on, emerging into a maintenance chamber beneath the spaceport. From here, they could access the loading bays without passing through the scanners, if they timed it right. Jalen checked his watch. "Next cargo drops in 8 minutes. We slip into one of the containers, ride it to the freighter, and we're gone." "And if they check the containers?" "Then we improvise." The minutes stretched like hours. When the platform finally rumbled to life, they moved fast, slipping into the shadow of a massive crate as it was loaded. Inside, the air was thick and stale, but it was shelter. The crate shuddered as it was lifted, then settled into place. Sierra's eyes found his in the dimness. "If we make it off this rock, what then?" "Then you get your proof to whoever can use it. And maybe," he hesitated, the faintest smile tugging at his lips, "maybe we figure out what comes after." The freighter's engines roared, and for the first time that night, he felt a flicker of hope. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the start of something far bigger and far more dangerous. The freighter's departure was smooth, the vibration under the metal floor steady as they rose from the docking platform. Sierra sat with her knees pulled up, her gaze fixed on the faint seam of light where the crate's panels didn't quite meet. Outside that sliver was the colony, already beginning to fade into the black. Jalen kept one ear tuned to the hum of the engines and the other to the rhythm of her breathing. She was tense, waiting for the moment something went wrong. He was waiting for it too. When the first jolt came, it wasn't the freighter's routine turbulence. It was sharper, heavier, the sound of a locking clamp engaging where none should be. Jalen's hand found the grip of his sidearm before his mind finished the thought. The crate lurched, and then light flooded in as the lid was torn away. 2 men in port security uniforms stood over them, weapons drawn. "Out," one barked, voice clipped and cold. Jalen raised his hand slowly, stepping out first, his mind scanning for options. The second guard reached for Sierra, but she jerked back, the bioluminescent lines along her arms flaring bright. "She's wanted for theft and obstruction of colony law," the first man said. "And you're charged with aiding her escape." Jalen's smile was slow and humorless. "Guess we're both criminals, then." The guard tightened his grip on the weapon. That was his mistake. Jalen moved fast, catching the barrel and twisting hard. The weapon clattered to the floor as he drove his shoulder into the man's chest, knocking him back into the bulkhead. The second guard grabbed Sierra's arm, but she spun, using his own weight to pull him forward into a knee strike that left him wheezing. Jalen kicked one weapon out of reach, scooped up the other, and pointed it squarely at the first guard. "Here's how this is going to work," he said evenly. "You're going to forget you saw us. In fact, you're going to open that service hatch over there and pretend we never came aboard." The man hesitated, but the look in Jalen's eyes made the choice for him. The hatch hissed open, revealing a narrow crawl space that smelled faintly of coolant. Jalen motioned for Sierra to go first, then followed, sealing it behind them. The crawl space was cramped, forcing them to move hunched over, the metal underfoot clanging with each step. They emerged into a maintenance bay, deserted except for the soft whir of automated systems. Sierra leaned against the wall, catching her breath. "You didn't have to do that." "Sure I did," he said. You think I'd let them drag you back after all that running? Her lips quirked into something halfway between gratitude and disbelief. You're either the stupidest human I've met or the most stubborn. Probably both, he admitted. They stayed hidden in the maintenance bay until the freighter's jump sequence engaged, the ship shuddering as it slipped into hyperspace. Only then did Jalen risk moving them to a quiet corner of the crew deck. He'd traveled enough to know where crews kept their emergency rations and blankets. And soon they were sitting cross-legged on the floor, sharing a packet of nutrient bars that tasted vaguely of cardboard. So where exactly are we taking this proof? Jalen asked between bites. Sierra unhooked a small data module from a hidden pocket in the coat. There's a network on the inner trade routes. Journalists, whistleblowers, people who still believe in justice. They've got a hub on Kiro's Reach. If I can get this there, they'll broadcast it to every sector. And if they don't, her expression hardened, then I find someone who will. I didn't lose my brother just to watch his name erased. Jalen studied her for a moment. There was a steel in her voice that hadn't been there when they met, a steadiness beneath the fear. All right, Kiro's Reach it is. They made it 2 days before the freighter's captain discovered them. A stocky man with a weathered face and the slow drawl of someone who'd seen too much. He found them in the galley and didn't bother reaching for a weapon. You're the stowaways my security detail forgot to mention, he said. Jalen straightened, ready to negotiate, but the captain waved him down. Don't bother. I already know your story. Word travels faster than your kind think. Thing is, I don't much care for the colony's way of doing business. He glanced at Sierra. You're safe until we reach the next relay. After that, you're on your own. It was more generosity than Jalen expected, and he nodded once in thanks. Sierra said nothing, but the look she gave the captain carried a weight of unspoken gratitude. When the relay station came into view, a massive ring-shaped structure orbiting a dull red gas giant, Jalen's unease returned. Places like this were breeding grounds for bounty hunters, smugglers, and information brokers, and if Sierra's face was already on the colony's wanted lists, it wouldn't take long for someone to recognize her. They disembarked with the rest of the crew, keeping to the quieter corridors. But halfway to the docking bay where they hoped to catch a transport, Jalen caught sight of 2 men in armor bearing the crest of the Outer Colony's Security Council. His hand closed around Sierra's elbow, steering her into a side passage just as the men turned their heads. They're here already, she whispered. Then we move faster. They wove through the warren of maintenance corridors until they reached the far end of the station, where a battered cargo shuttle was taking on supplies. Jalen approached the pilot, a wiry woman with grease-streaked hands. You headed toward the inner routes. Depends who's asking. The kind who can pay, Jalen said, sliding a handful of credit chips into her palm. Her gaze flicked to Sierra, then back to him. Fine, but you didn't get on my ship, and you don't cause me trouble. They were in the air within the hour, the station shrinking behind them. Sierra sank into her seat, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. Do you think we'll make it? She asked. Jalen glanced out the viewport at the streaking stars. We've made it this far. But his gut told him the hardest part was still ahead.